Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about boundaries in the process of healing from enmeshment, and I wanted to bring you three very specific types of boundaries that I teach my clients in the process of healing from enmeshment. I know if you've been through enmeshment trauma, it's probably very, very hard for you to understand how boundaries work, how to set boundaries, what to do when you set boundaries, how to, reinforce your boundaries, and how to set boundaries in a way that actually honors relationships and improves them versus like creates walls that alienates other people. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in this video. And I want you to understand, I'm bringing you these three boundaries, but they exist on a scale, okay? The first one is important for you to master. It's the least risky one, and it's important for you to master before moving on to the next one. And the second one is super important for you to master before moving on to the third one. So they actually exist in stages: beginner, intermediate, advanced, all right? Don't skip one because you're going to emotionally bypass if you try to jump. A lot of people try to jump to the third one right away, and you're going to see why as I talk about this. Okay, so the first type of boundary is what I consider an internal boundary. It is a boundary within ourselves and in between the different conflicting parts of ourselves, okay? Think about that movie Inside Out. You have all these crazy little characters running around in your brain in any given moment in time. And sometimes one of them is going a little out of control, and we need to learn how to set boundaries with that part of ourselves. Not to repress it or deny its, existence, but to just set a boundary around it so that it doesn't take over. So maybe you give it space to exist for a little bit, and then you say, okay, not right now. I need another part of myself to take over this interaction. So an example of an internal boundary that I have with myself, I am a recovering anxious attacher, and I have the tendency to ruminate for a very long time on the conflicts that I have in my relationships with others. I mean, a long time, like hours and hours a day if I had a conflict with them. And it doesn't help that I'm a therapist. I go really deep into my sort of analysis hole and process. So I have had to learn to set boundaries with myself, internal boundaries, around how long I allow myself to ruminate. So if I had a conflict with my mom, for example, instead of spending hours, I will actually give myself a time boundary, and I will say, okay, I'm going to spend 30 minutes. I'm going to spend 1 hour journaling about this, processing this, talking with a friend about it. And then I'm going to set a boundary around that, and I'm going to go take care of the rest of the stuff that I have to take care of in my day. And if it's still bothering me after that, then I will come back to it and give it more time. Okay? And typically, once I do that, I find that I don't actually want to come back to it, that all I really needed was 30 minutes or an hour to process that thing. So this is a type of internal boundary. We can also set a boundary with the different internal voices that we have inside of our heads. Sometimes we kind of like get lost in negative thinking. And I think it's important to allow ourselves to observe the negative thoughts that are coming up for us, but don't allow them to take over. Can you set a boundary with yourself? Say, okay, well, this is a little bit of negative thinking. I've been thinking negatively for about 20 minutes now. Can I redirect this to something more positive or constructive? What other perspectives on this situation are possible outside of just the negative and catastrophic ones, right? So that's super important too. You can set time boundaries with yourself, like, oh, every day I'm going to spend an hour on social media and that's it. Or, I'm going to stop checking this person's, my ex-boyfriend's social media at least for 3 days. I'm going to try to fast for like 3 days of my ex-boyfriend's social media. These are types of boundaries that we set with ourselves internally in order to get a little bit more emotional control over our experience. Okay. Again, it allows us to direct our energy and our attention with intention. All right. All right, the second type of boundary for me is what I call a unilateral boundary. It is a boundary that we set for ourselves, but it is relational. It is with other people, with the world in general, okay? It's firm, it's non-negotiable, and it honors the self's needs only in that moment, okay? So it's kind of like saying no without having to explain yourself, without having to make any type of, submission to what the other person wants, without having to negotiate. Quite simply, This is my no. This is how it's going to happen for me. No, I'm not going to that event. No, this behavior is not okay with me, so I'm going to remove myself from the interaction. No, I don't have time for that. No, I don't have money for that. It is quite simply a firm no. Now, this one is probably the hardest one that I think people that are healing from enmeshment have to learn how to do, because it brings up all sorts of really difficult feelings that we were not taught how to deal with in our enmeshed dynamics. Things like guilt, things like shame, things like fear that the other person's going to react or be disappointed or reject us or give us the silent treatment or punish us, right? So I think in the initial stages of healing from enmeshment, you have to practice this one like, your life depends on it, because it does, okay? Because if you start to open to negotiation before practicing this one, in the early stages of healing, that negotiation can lead to collapse and regression back into that learned behavior, that ingrained pattern, that dysfunctional pattern of always choosing others and sacrificing yourself, sacrificing your own needs, which leads to all sorts of problems in later life and in that relationship, things like resentment, things like burnout, right? Okay. So this one is also really important to practice because it creates self-trust. It creates self-trust because it shows you that you can say no and deal with your feelings about other people's reactions and still survive. You're going to be okay. You set that boundary. You feel guilt in that moment. That person reacted to you. They're disappointed. They're frustrated. They're angry. They're yelling at you. They're criticizing you. They're shaming you. They're giving you the silent treatment. They're telling you they're never going to talk to you ever again. They're telling you you're a bad daughter, a bad friend, a bad whatever. And you, as a result of that, feel fear, feel panic, feel shame, feel guilt, feel all these uncomfortable feelings inside of yourself. And then you hold that boundary and you sit through that really uncomfortable emotional experience and you let the storm pass. And all of a sudden, you notice a few days later, the relationship is perfectly fine and you set that boundary. Okay? It builds self-trust because it shows you that you can move through the thing that you were fearing. The reason we develop fear of setting boundaries in our enmeshed relationships is because it generates emotional reactions that we are scared we don't know how to deal with, that we are scared we're going to die from. I mean, not really, but you know what I mean, right? That's what it feels like. It feels like the fear of death. And so sometimes we're avoiding that. We're avoiding setting that boundary because we're scared of the emotional reaction that we're going to have to deal with. And so sometimes it's facing the hard thing, facing the emotional discomfort, realizing you can tolerate it. You're going to be fine. It's going to be uncomfortable in that moment. It's going to feel a little painful, but everything's going to be okay on the other side of that, right? And maybe even better, maybe you realize like, oh my gosh, thank God I faced that, because things are so much better on the other side of this boundary, right? I'm actually healthier, more aligned and more present for myself and for my relationships as a result of this boundary. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example that I'm going to use for the next type of boundary as well, and you're going to see the contrast. Let's say that you had a really hard day at work. Okay, a lot of stressful things happen. Your boss yelled at you several times. You messed up on a bunch of things, but you made it through the day, and now you're home. You're just you're dysregulated. Your nervous system is activated, and you find some time to sit in the corner of your room and read a book. And you're finally starting to self-soothe and calm down and recharge, which is super necessary because the rest of the energy that you have available for that evening, you're going to have to use to complete a really challenging and demanding school assignment that's due by 11 p.m. So that time that you're taking for yourself is absolutely necessary. Now, let's say unexpectedly, your mom comes home early from work. She comes into your room and she says, "Let's cook dinner together. I miss you." Okay, in this situation, a unilateral boundary, it's going to honor your needs and your emotional experience. You're going to say, "No, mom, tonight I can't because." Maybe you don't even say because. Maybe you just say, "No, mom, not tonight. Thanks anyway. Thanks for the invitation." Maybe, depending upon the type of relationship you have with your mom and how she's going to receive it, you can offer an explanation. You can say, "No, mom, had a really long day at work. Need to recharge because I have to finish a school assignment. Not tonight." Okay? Depends. Point being, it's a no. It's a firm no. There's no room for negotiation. There's no room for considering her needs and her wants and her emotions in that moment. It's all about you, and that is perfectly okay and healthy. You are allowed to do that, and you are worthy of having your boundaries and having your emotional needs met, okay? And you are responsible for that, okay? So it's totally acceptable for you to set this boundary. Now, I know that when we grow up in enmeshed family systems, we learn that it's not, but it is. And part of the healing process is relearning that it is okay for you to have this type of boundary. But again, remember, you're going to have to probably, if you've been enmeshed your whole life, you're probably going to have to feel guilt in that moment. You may feel fear that the other person, that your mom's going to have a reaction. She's going to feel disappointed. She's going to feel sad. She's going to punish you. She's going to give you the silent treatment. She's going to reject you. She's never going to invite you again to have dinner with her. You're going to have to work through all those feelings in order to say no. Okay? That is a unilateral boundary, and you absolutely need to learn how to do it when you're healing from enmeshment. Okay? All right. The next type of boundary is what I call a collaborative boundary. This is an advanced stage of boundary setting, guys. Again, do not skip steps 1 and 2, please. Collaborative boundaries I consider relational boundaries, okay? They are flexible, they're negotiable, and they honor mutual needs. So they honor both people's core emotional needs and desires in that given moment. So they're also creative because you have to find creative solutions that honor both people's needs. So at a more superficial and surface level, you are reading in your corner because your emotional need is to calm down. Your mom is asking you to make dinner with her because the emotional need is connection with you. So, in a collaborative boundary, what you're going to do in that moment in time is to get down to the core emotional need, right? You want to come down, she wants to connect, and find a creative solution that can honor both. Okay? So, it's going to be mutually satisfying for both of you guys. And, again, it's an advanced stage, so I want you to be very cautious in how you approach this. But an example of this could be maybe the same interaction happens. She comes in your room and she invites you to have dinner with her. And you say to her, well, mom, here's what I'm feeling. Here's the type of day that I had. Here's what's going on for me right now emotionally. And here's what I need. I really need to calm down because I have a hard assignment that's coming up. Okay? And I need to finish it. So maybe we can do it another night, or maybe we can find another solution. And your mom says, oh, honey, of course, I totally understand. This is not an enmeshed mother, by the way. This would be a differentiated mother in a healthy and secure relationship. But she says, oh, honey, totally understand. I was just wanting to connect with you because I haven't seen you in a few days. So I just wanting to be a little bit more physically close. How about you come into the living room? I'll turn off the TV, I'll make sure everything is extra quiet so you can relax, I'll give you your favorite blanket. I'll make you your favorite comfort food. I just want you to be a little bit closer to me because I've missed you. How about that? You find this to be a perfectly fine alternative solution because you still get your core need met. And then on top of that, you're going to get some comfort food from your mom. And you're also probably going to feel satisfied that you're meeting her need as well in that moment, or her wish or her desire. Okay? So this is a collaborative boundaries. You guys both work together to meet both of your needs. You didn't have to sacrifice your need, and you didn't have to also shut down her need, or did not consider her need in that moment. The problem with enmeshed relationships is that you will sacrifice your emotional truth in that moment in order to meet your mother's needs. Most people in enmeshed relationships will be like, oh, well, man, I was really having a great time calming myself down here and reading in my corner. But if I don't go do this thing that mom asked me to do with her right now, she's going to be upset, or I'm going to feel guilty, or I'm going to be a bad daughter, son, whatever. And so, you know what? I really wanted to calm down right now, but I guess I'm going to have to go do this. And so you get up and you go do it. You don't actually, it's not the emotional truth. You don't have the full emotional capacity in that moment to do that. You're not regulated, and you're stressed, and you have a bunch of stuff to do. And so you're not going to actually be fully present with your mom. And you're not going to actually give her what I think deep down she's wanting and needing from you. And you're going to feel resentment. You're going to feel resentment. You're going to feel even more drained, even more stressed out, and burnt out as well. So that's what we do when we are in enmeshed dynamics. That's actually not healthy. It's not healthy for you, and it's not healthy for the relationship or for her. The healthier version is actually the collaborative. The healthiest version is the healthiest approach. Excuse me, I'm stumbling over my words. The healthiest approach is actually the collaborative boundary, which honors both people's needs. Or if you're not capable of the collaborative boundary yet, you will be eventually. Again, it's the advanced stage. But if you're not capable yet, a healthier version than self-sacrifice is actually just saying no in that moment. All right? Okay, so one last thing for the collaborative boundary, this can be, it can be happen on multiple levels. It actually grows, it becomes more and more advanced. There are advanced stages of collaborative boundaries as well. So collaborative boundaries can be about timing. So for example, you might say to someone, well, not right now, but how about at 10 a.m.? Like, you know, a friend wants to vent about something, but you're at the gym and you have a couple of work things to do before you can really give her your full attention. Instead of dropping everything in order to meet your friend's need, you can say, hey, how about at 10 a.m. I give you a call? You negotiate the time, right? We can do this, but not right now. How about this time, right? Here's when. It can be about amount, right? Intensity, for example. So not that much, but here's how much. Maybe your friend really wants you present for the holidays with her family. Or let's say your mother-in-law really wants you present with her family for the holidays. And you say, okay, yes, but not the full 4 days that you are planning events. We're going to be there for 2 days, or we're going to be there for only one. Okay, it's about setting a boundary with how much you can give. It can be situational, like the example I just gave you, you know, not in this way, but let's do it this way instead, because it'll work for both of us. And then at a very advanced level, it can be about preferences. Actually, stating your preferences is a type of boundary. You know, if your mom had come in your room that day and she said, hey, come make dinner with me, you simply saying, hey, mom, I would prefer to be by myself tonight because I need to down regulate. That is actually an example of setting a boundary. At the more advanced stages, when you are in a very differentiated and healthy and secure relationship, stating preferences is a way of boundary setting because both people are honoring the preferences of each other and finding creative solutions to meet each person's preferences. All right, guys. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this video. Let me know if you've ever practiced collaborative boundaries or unilateral boundaries or even internal boundaries and how that experience went for you in your enmeshed relationships. And let me know which one you're going to start working on before the end of this year. Remember, the holidays are coming up. If you're watching this video when I post it. The holidays are coming up and it is the perfect time to start practicing your boundaries and healing from enmeshment in your family systems. If you guys want to learn more with me, be sure to check the links in my descriptions for the different ways that you can work more deeply with me. And thank you all for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.